The Titanic is sitting at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean right now. We know exactly where it is. We've sent cameras down, we've sent submarines, we've even sent tourists. So why hasn't anyone just brought it back up? It seems like the obvious move, right? You've got the most famous ship in history sitting on the ocean floor. Turn it into a museum, charge admission, you'd make a fortune, and people have tried. Over the past century, engineers, billionaires, and salvage companies have proposed dozens of plans to raise the Titanic. Some were creative, some were completely insane, and every single one of them failed. And here's why. The wreck lies almost 12,500 feet beneath the surface of the North Atlantic, roughly 2.5 miles straight down. To picture that distance, imagine stacking the Empire State Building on top of itself 8 times over, and you'd still fall short of reaching it. At that depth, the water pressure hits around 6,000 pounds per square inch, about 400 times what you feel standing on a beach. Your lungs would collapse in an instant. An ordinary submarine hull would fold up like an aluminum can. And in June 2023, the world watched exactly what that kind of pressure does. The Titan submersible, carrying 5 passengers toward the wreck, suffered a sudden and total implosion. Its carbon fiber hull gave way in a split second. Every person aboard died instantly, and the force was so violent that the vessel was blown apart into scattered debris across the seabed. That's the destructive power of 6,000 psi against equipment built specifically to survive the deep. Now picture trying to rig cables, attach lifting gear, and haul an entire ship upward under those conditions, in pitch darkness, near freezing water, 2.5 miles from the nearest gasp of air. But suppose you somehow got past the pressure problem, built machinery tough enough to work down there. You'd still be facing another obstacle: mass. The Titanic displaces over 52,000 tons, the equivalent of roughly 36,000 automobiles. There isn't a crane anywhere on the planet capable of lifting that. No cable system ever constructed could bear a load of that magnitude from that depth. The tensile strength needed simply doesn't exist in any material we can currently produce at that scale, and even if you generated enough upward pull somehow, the vessel would come apart the moment you tried to move it. Because here's the part most people miss. The Titanic isn't resting down there as one intact ship. It's split in two while sinking. The bow and stern sit roughly 2,000 feet apart across open seabed. In photos, the bow looks deceptively whole. The stern, meanwhile, is barely recognizable, a mangled, crushed heap of metal that no longer resembles a ship at all. Even the bow, solid as it appears, is dangerously brittle. More than a century of corrosion has eaten away at the steel. Railings have already crumbled, decks are caving inward. Try attaching cables and pulling, and the ship wouldn't rise. It would shatter. So lifting it in one piece is simply off the table. That hasn't stopped some remarkably creative and remarkably bad ideas. One famous concept called for stuffing the wreck with ping pong balls, millions upon millions of them, betting that all that trapped air would generate enough lift to float the ship upward. Clever on paper. The catch, at 6,000 psi, every single ball would be flattened instantly the moment it hit the wreck. Useless. Another proposal suggested pumping petroleum jelly into the hull to push out water and create buoyancy. Someone else floated the idea of encasing the whole ship in an enormous block of ice, theoretically buoyant enough to carry it upward. Engineers at the BOC Group actually ran the numbers on this one. The answer came out to 500,000 tons of liquid nitrogen pumped down to the ocean floor. Not exactly a practical figure. Then there's the plot from Clive Cussler's 1976 novel, Raise the Titanic, where the protagonist patches the hull, floods it with compressed air, and the ship shoots up to the surface like a submarine venting its ballast tanks. Dramatic, sure. But the book was written back when people still assumed the Titanic sank whole. It didn't. And even if it had, compressed air at that depth would demand pressures no hull on Earth could withstand. None of these schemes hold up, not even slightly. Still, someone did manage to bring a chunk of the Titanic back to daylight, and the story behind it is almost as dramatic as the sinking itself. Back in 1994, a company called RMS Titanic Inc. located a massive section of the outer hull lying in the debris field, a bus-sized piece of the starboard side with 4 intact portholes, 3 of them still holding glass. They nicknamed it the Big Piece and set out to retrieve it. The first attempt came in 1996. Attach diesel-filled flotation bags to the fragment, inflate them, and let the 15-ton section drift slowly upward. 3 expedition vessels were on site, plus 2 full cruise liners circling nearby, packed with spectators, Titanic survivors, and even a few celebrities. Thousands watched from the railings as the bags were released, and the Big Piece began its 2-hour climb toward the surface. It broke through, the crowd erupted, and then a hurricane rolled in. The storm tore through the recovery zone, the line snapped, and the 15-ton fragment sank straight back to the bottom. The whole mission was scrapped. 2 years later, in 1998, the team tried again with a refined plan and better gear. This time, when the Big Piece surfaced, it held. Crews carefully winched it onto a recovery ship, and today it sits on permanent display at the Titanic exhibition in Las Vegas, viewed by more than 22 million visitors since. But consider the scale of what that took. 4 years, 2 full expeditions, millions of dollars, and no small amount of luck for a single 15-ton fragment. The entire ship weighs over 52,000 tons. Across the decades, salvage crews have pulled more than 5,500 individual artifacts from the site: dishware, jewelry, coins, a violin, even engine telegraphs. Every single dive to retrieve them cost tens of thousands of dollars using specialized deep-sea submersibles, and each of those objects represents only a sliver of the ship's actual bulk. We can visit the wreck, we can photograph it, we can bring up fragments here and there, but lifting the ship itself, not happening and probably never will.